Let's begin with a simple, terrifying question. What if our home isn't safe? Not because of what we might do to it, but because of where it is. What if our solar system isn't a cradle of life, but a cosmic crime scene, and we are the ones who just stumbled upon the body? For centuries, we were told a comforting bedtime story. The planets formed from a gentle cloud of dust and gas, slowly, peacefully coalescing over eons. It's neat. It's simple. It's a lie. What if the truth is far more violent? What if a massive, watery world once thrived in the space between Mars and Jupiter, a planet our ancestors may have called Maldek, and was violently erased from existence, leaving behind only a belt of rubble, a legacy of cosmic violence, and a chain of evidence we are only now beginning to understand? Across the globe, our oldest myths speak of this catastrophe. They tell of lost golden ages, of titanic wars in the heavens between gods and titans, of skies torn asunder by celestial fire. In Babylon, they told of the dragon goddess Tiamat being split in two by a conquering deity, her sundered body becoming the earth and the hammered-out bracelet of the heavens, the asteroid belt. Scholars dismiss these tales as primitive allegories, yet the physical evidence refuses to stay buried. The asteroid belt doesn't behave like leftover planetary building blocks. It behaves like shrapnel, the shattered, pulverized remains of a world blown apart from the inside out. And then there is the star witness, Mars. The red planet is an enigma, a world that makes no sense. It's too small, too damaged, its entire northern hemisphere a smooth, low-lying basin as if it were once an ocean floor, while the southern hemisphere is a brutal landscape of highlands, scarred by relentless bombardment. This isn't the geology of a planet, it's the geology of a victim. Could Mars have once been a moon, its face forever scorched, and its oceans boiled away in the instant its parent planet, Maldek, was annihilated? The whispers of this truth echo from our own planet's deep past. In the blistering heat of forgotten deserts, archaeologists brush sand from stone fragments that defy explanation, their hands trembling as intricate symbols emerge, patterns and star maps that match no known terrestrial language. Explorers in the field send back hushed, encrypted reports. Are these warnings from a few desperate survivors who made it to Earth? Or are they just chilling coincidences carved by wind and time? In sterile laboratories, scientists argue, their professional skepticism warring with the data on their screens. But the evidence is relentless. Strange isotopic ratios in meteorites hint at a catastrophic energy release in our system's recent past. Ancient, fractured craters stretch across planetary bodies like the signatures of a celestial shockwave. Even the myths converge on a single, terrifying narrative, a mighty world brought low, its people undone not by a natural disaster, but by the very machines they built to serve them. The deeper we look, the more unsettling the questions become. Could a civilization of beings, giants, perhaps, adapted to a larger world's gravity, have thrived on Maldek's moon, the world we now call Mars? Did they build monuments, cities, and machines of breathtaking intelligence, perhaps even artificial life? And when that artificial life rebelled, did a desperate, losing war lead to the deployment of a final, planet-shattering weapon? A weapon so devastating it not only annihilated the enemy, but the very world they stood upon. Imagine the sight, a world exploding into a trillion pieces of incandescent rock, its oceans flashing into steam, its atmosphere consumed in a silent, system-wide firestorm. Imagine its moon, Mars, violently cast adrift, stripped of its own atmosphere and water, left as a blood-red, silent witness forever circling the sun. Mainstream science scoffs at the theory, of course. There's not enough mass in the asteroid belt to form a planet. The critics say, their voices dripping with condescension. It's physically impossible for a planet to explode. Yet the counterarguments persist, whispered in the corridors of independent research labs. What if most of Maldek's mass was vaporized in the blast, ejected into interstellar space, or consumed by the sun in a fiery final scream? What remains now would be only the scattered, sun-bleached bones of a once-living world. And the fact remains, the asteroid belt sits in the exact orbital position where Bode's law, a mathematical formula for planetary spacing, predicted a planet should be. Is that a coincidence? Or is it a clue? a cosmic X marking the spot, hidden in plain sight for centuries? Our legends tell of a great flood, of fire raining from the heavens, of gods punishing a hubristic humanity. But what if these are not myths? What if they are fragmented, trauma-laced memories of a real cosmic disaster, witnessed by our terrified, primitive ancestors? In quiet, darkened rooms, remote viewers, their minds cast out into the void, describe the same haunting visions, cities of crystal and metal collapsing under a red sky on Mars, beings tall and gaunt fleeing into shelters deep underground. Even old, forgotten comic books, in their strange, accidental prescience, told tales of Martian giants, rebellious machines, and a world that exploded. Why do so many disparate fragments of human culture, from ancient myth to modern fiction, echo the exact same impossible story? Step into the desert night with explorers as they scan the horizon with ground-penetrating radar. The stars glitter, cold and endless. Between them hangs a silence that feels heavy, a silence hiding a secret. The team descends into a newly discovered cavern system, its walls lined with strange, metallic veins that are not of this earth. Headlamps catch unnatural, rainbow gleams in the rock. Instruments begin to beep erratically, detecting localized radiation spikes where there should be absolute silence. One of them turns to the other, his voice a dry whisper that is swallowed by the immense darkness. "This isn't natural," he says. "Something happened here." Everywhere, the anomalies accumulate. Mars bears tidal bulges on opposite sides, the permanent scars suggesting it was once gravitationally locked to a much larger parent body. Valles Marineris, the canyon system that dwarfs Earth's Grand Canyon, looks less like the result of water erosion and more like a catastrophic stress fracture, a deep wound carved into the planet when it was violently torn from its orbit. None of it fits the neat, comforting story of planetary formation, but it all fits the terrifying story of a moon scarred and orphaned when its parent planet was murdered. And so the questions sharpen, becoming as cold and pointed as shards of glass. Was Maldek real? Did its destruction create the asteroid belt, forever twist the orbits of the outer planets, and leave Mars a broken, radioactive ghost? If so, what does that say about the universe and our place in it? Are we studying a solar system, or are we unknowingly living inside a crime scene? And the final, most unsettling thought of all, if a world in our own backyard could be destroyed by its own creations, could it happen again? What if the gap between Mars and Jupiter isn't empty at all, but a graveyard? Night after night, we map a halo of shattered stone and tell ourselves it's debris that never quite became a world. Yet the numbers whisper a different story. Ratios line up, orbits rhyme, and in the dust between two planets we keep finding the same suggestion. Something used to live there. Something died. The field team moves before dawn, boots gnawing at cold sand, radios low, breath ribboning the air. Their instruments blink to life like nervous fireflies, gravimeters, spectrometers, scanners purring in quiet agreement. Beneath the sand the readings rise, like a pulse under skin. If this is random rubble, why do the fragments sing the same note? In the tent, a scientist traces ellipses with a trembling finger. The model locks, unlocks, locks again. There is a missing term, a mass that belongs in the equation then vanishes like a ghost at daybreak. It's not absence, she says, it's aftermath. If a planet once circled here, the belt would be its obituary. Every stone, a sentence. Skeptics lean hard on probability. Worlds don't explode. True, until they do. What we know is gravity writes in scars. Venus spins backward, Uranus rolls like a fallen barrel, Neptune sits slightly off script. These are not tidy classroom diagrams. These are bruises. In every bruise there is a story of force, direction, time. Who hit whom, and how hard. We hike across volcanic fields that chuff heat through hairline cracks. The ground looks cooked, not formed. Glass frozen mid-scream, pumice gulping starlight. A geologist holds up a blackened shard. Under ultraviolet it blooms with ghostly veins. Melt, quench, shock, he murmurs. Fast, violent. Natural, perhaps, or collateral. By lantern, the archaeologists open another chamber, brushstone whispering under their strokes. There are spirals, concentric rings, a tiny dot that moves from circle to circle like a bead on a wire. Someone meant for this to be understood by people who had forgotten the language but still remembered the sky. On another slab, figures with raised hands stand under a raining arc. Is that prayer or warning? The camera climbs, and the desert falls away into a mile-wide bowl, rim gnawed to knives. Impact, yes, but of what? The pattern of ejecta is wrong for a simple strike. The floor ripples, like water slapped by a giant palm. Multiple bodies, common vector, the mapping text says. Like a family traveling together. We think of the comet that arrived as a string of pearls and died in a giant's atmosphere. Things break. When they do, they keep traveling as kin. At the mobile observatory, cold glass stares into forever. The software scrubs the plane of the ecliptic until it shines. The belt is not a smear. It is a ring, crisp as a scar. The gaps inside it echo the cadence of bigger planets, as if their gravity has been conducting the debris in time for ages. If chance made this music, why does it keep to a beat? Doubters remind us of mass. The belt is too light to be a planet's corpse. But the violence that can unmake a world doesn't file paperwork or leave tidy remains. Vaporized rock becomes wind. Slag falls into the star. The rest sails outward, a diaspora of stone. We don't weigh grief to prove that a life occurred. We find the photograph, the letter, the key that opens nothing now. At a windswept shrine, an elder unrolls a cloth map stiff with age. Lines, crescents, a notch between two signs. Our mother said a torch was broken, he tells us. A fire carried in pieces across the dark. If myth survives facts like seeds survive winter, perhaps this is one that found spring. Night. The plateau hums in the generator's breath. A linguist layers transparencies, a star map over a mural, then a diagram over both. 3 points align, a canyon, a crater, a stone ring that shouldn't be here. The overlay suggests procession, then rupture. She writes 2 words in the margin, before/after. We descend into a chasm where the walls glitter with metallic threads. A hammer tap answers with a bell-like ring. The sample core shows glass welded to crystalline lattices as if fire braided geology in a single terrible minute. The seismologist draws a quick graph. Impulse, not simmer, she says. One event. One sentence. Period. Morning roars in a red squall. The team huddles around the portable hollow, blue orbits spinning like music on a turntable. There it is again, the clean, impossible gap where an orbit should be. The lead analyst doesn't smile, doesn't frown, he exhales. Either nature loves coincidences, he says, or we're late to the story. Cameras roll as a monument emerges from sand. 2 faces back to back, eroded but deliberate, a compass carved in stone. Drones rake light across its flanks. Glyphs leap awake, lines marching toward the same notch on the ancient cloth. A memorial? A milepost? Or the oldest confession we'll ever read? The argument heats. Accretion explains so much, its advocates say, don't burn the map because one road is missing. Fair. But maps are revised, not worshipped. And evidence isn't a popularity contest. We lay new sheets atop the old and trace again. The river moves. The coastline erodes. The world, it turns out, is alive. In the quiet after the storm, the sky becomes a ledger. Meteors cross the horizon like signatures, brief and brilliant. Somewhere up there, fragments still circle, patient as time. If a planet can die, a question follows like a shadow. What killed it? Hubris? Chance? A neighbor's careless gravity? An act we can't yet name? By the final campfire, the team is bone-tired and wordless. Boots steam, mugs warm hands. The radio ticks softly, counting stars. No one says Maldek. No one has to. We are past naming and deep into knowing. The camera lingers on faces reflecting coals, doubt, hope, an ache that feels older than our species. Back at the scope, the astronomer cues the last pass. The belt sharpens. A narrow wake threads through it where something large once moved. She marks it, dates it, copies the file. History, she whispers, isn't what happened. It's what remains. On screen, the stones keep time to a silent measure, and every orbit is a hand raised in testimony. So we leave the ridge with more questions than we carried up. If a world died here, can we prove it without the corpse? If we can prove it, will we believe what it implies about ourselves? Maybe the better riddle is this. Why does the absence feel so heavy? Between Mars and Jupiter, night holds a space the shape of a planet. We point to the belt and tell our children it's where rocks live. One day, perhaps, we'll tell them it's where a world once sang. And when they ask why the song ended, we'll look to the scars on neighboring skies, to craters that ripple like frozen thunder, to an orphaned red desert that might remember being a moon. And we'll say, listen, the story isn't finished. What if Mars isn't just a neighbor, but a survivor? Not a failed Earth, not a lifeless red rock, but a memory in orbit, scarred tissue circling the sun. We arrive at the rim of Valles Marineris and the ground falls away like a torn page, a canyon so vast the mind misreads it. Erosion alone strains to explain this scale. Look closely. The walls are ribbed, tiered, fluted, as if currents pressed against them for ages. Not from above but from within, tides and stone. If Mars once circled a larger body, pulled and released in a steady 1,000-mile heartbeat, this is the kind of wound you would expect. At first light the team moves in silence. The only sound a thin rasp of wind combing dust. Helmet glass gathers the sky. Boots test the rim like readers touching braille. Our geologist lifts a shard that glitters with salts, a chemistry of absence. Where water left, it signed its name. Sensors find hydrated minerals tucked into shadows, not as random patches, but as distinct paths, like shorelines remembered by the land after the sea is gone. If this is fantasy, why do the rocks keep telling the same sober story? Far to the west, Olympus Mons rises, not a mountain so much as an accusation. It isn't merely tall, it is broad beyond belief, a shield piled up by eruptions that outlived empires of time. Some say it proves Mars was hot. Others say it proves Mars was stressed. Imagine a world flexed by a companion's gravity, seams opening, magma lifted like breath, a volcano built not by chance, but by choreography. If Maldek once held Mars the way a planet holds a moon, the dance would have left bruises. Olympus Mons looks like one. We cross a plain quilted in polygons, dried mud cracked into geometry, as if a climate once held steady enough to ride a rhythm, then failed suddenly. A scientist whispers, almost to herself, this is not a barren world. It's a story without its first chapters. Down in the trench, the expedition brushes a thread of crystals from ochre soil. The analyzer answers with a calm, indifferent tone, chlorides, sulfates, the chemistry of evaporated basins. We log the coordinates. We bag a grain. We try not to look at each other the way people look when their private skepticism begins to melt. Water, someone says, and then adds, lots. As if quantity could make belief less risky. Night sharpens the argument. Around the mess table, maps and models crowd the light. The accretion purists draw circles, then arrows, then the comforting words, nothing unusual. The iconoclasts slide in diagrams of tidal bulges, synchronous locking, stress lines that match the canyon, the basin, the collapsed caldera half a world away. It isn't proof, but it rhymes too well to ignore. One side warns about conspiracy thinking, the other warns about complacency. Mars waits, patient as bedrock. At a low escarpment, we find a ledge etched with wave-like grooves that bend around obstacles and merge where channels meet, like flow remembering its own momentum. The rover's mast captures a panorama. Terraces step down in even falls, each one a former limit. Stand here, and the word coastline presents itself before you can censor it. Later, we descend a rubble chute and enter a chamber where the ceiling has half collapsed. On the floor, under dust, lies a plate of dark alloy scratched with spirals and a tiny point that repeats in position as the spirals widen. To call it a map would be indulgent. To call it nothing would be dishonest. From orbit, Mars is a two-tone riddle, a smooth north and a battered south. The dichotomy line meanders like a shoreline against an ancient continent. The mixed model of impacts, tides, and uplift feels messy, and so does the planet. Reality often underperforms our cleanest theories. In the captive hours of a dust storm, the astrophysicist unveils the orbital reconstruction from her tablet. The fit is not perfect, but it is graceful in its imperfections. Assume Mars once circled a heavier body where the belt now is. Assume that body was lost. Let momentum do the rest. The current orbit snaps into place with a click you feel in your ribs. It's a story, she admits, but the math likes it. We move again when the wind forgives us. In a gorge whose walls remember water, the quiet is total. The scientist with the sternest doubts is strangely gentle with the samples. The believer with the loudest voice is quiet as a chapel. The canyon does that. It levels us. By evening the sky has thinned to violet, and the moons climb like a whispered duet. A lone figure stands on a ridge and watches them trade places. If Mars truly was a moon, the symmetry is cruel, a moon watching moons. Back at the lab tent, the relic with spirals returns to the table. Under a more careful scan, faint lines bloom. Not letters, not numbers, but intervals. The linguist circles a pairing of marks and looks as if she's remembered a song from childhood. Tides, she says, barely audible. Not water alone. Gravity made visible. No one declares victory. No one tears up the textbooks. But the expedition's collective voice changes key. We stop asking whether Mars once had oceans. We ask how many, how deep, how often they moved. We stop asking if forces beyond weather shaped the land. We ask which forces, in what order, and with what rhythm. We stop asking if Mars belonged to another world. We ask what that world's loss made of this one. When the final pass over Valles Marineris ends, the canyon fades into the evening like a secret returning to itself. The narrator on our comms, the one who resists poetry, breaks character. This planet keeps its promises. Maybe he means that what is broken remembers being whole. Either way, as the lights click off one dome at a time, Mars does not feel empty anymore. It feels listening. And whatever it is listening for, we have begun to hear. What if the most controversial face in archaeology isn't carved on Earth at all, but staring back from a wind-cut mesa under a red sky? We enter Cydonia at dusk, when shadows sharpen old illusions and reveal new truths. The face rises from the plain, part geology, part suggestion, and the crew goes quiet. Is this pareidolia at planetary scale, or a monument eroded past recognition? The cameras circle, the lasers grid the stone, and the argument begins. If it is natural, it is beautifully natural. If not, it is the oldest portrait in human history of someone who was never human. Beyond the mesa, the ground swells into mounds that echo pyramids. Angles softened by ages, alignments teased by chance. We have been warned not to see patterns. Pattern seeing is how myths are made. But a surveyor slows, measuring azimuths beneath a sky turning violet. The layout hints at intention, then shrugs like a magician who refuses to repeat the trick. Coincidence is a number with many friends, the lead says. So is design. Inside a shallow trench, the archaeologist lifts a plate of alloy etched with triangles and lines that could be art or instruction. A wrist projector hovers star maps in the dust. We overlay Earth's ancient monuments for scale, not to conflate, but to compare. Similarity is not proof. Dismissal is not proof either. Between those poles, science walks, a narrow isthmus across a sea of wishful thinking and defensive certainty. Data interrupts romance. A field spectrometer spikes at a crater rim. Later, a soil core whispers ratios that make the geochemist pale. Strange signatures, the kind associated with energies that do not arrive by rain or wind. It is reckless to leap from a graph to a war, but it is also reckless to pretend the graph does not exist. Anomalies, the report says, consistent with catastrophic processes. In the tent that night, the word catastrophic does not feel theoretical. We descend into chambers where pillars have shouldered the weight of a vanished roof. On the walls, waves and suns, figures with hands raised, not in worship perhaps, but in warning. An idol emerges from rubble, two faces back to back, a double world. The linguist traces shallow grooves that repeat like a metronome. Intervals, she whispers. Cycles. What cycles? Tides of something larger than water. By noon we stand at a crater with a floor glazed in dark glass. The geologist's voice turns clinical to keep the heart from jumping. Rapid melt. Rapid cool. Lightning can fuse sand. Impacts can too. But the distribution looks wrong. Splash where there should be spray. Uncomfortable, she says. Scientists rarely say impossible. Uncomfortable is their red flare. Downslope, the wind reveals a terrace stair-stepped like a ziggurat. Drones rake light across risers that hold their height unnervingly well. If they are natural, they are disciplined. If they are not, then time has disguised their purpose without erasing it. Twilight finds us in a cavern where a metallic plate rests beneath soot like a coin under ash. Cleaned, it shows a chain of suns and a small circle that jumps position in measured steps. At each step, a glyph repeats. The translator doesn't claim a reading. She offers a feeling. Not prayer, she says. Procedure. Suppose you had to tell the future how the sky would look after a disaster. Would you write a poem or a schedule? When the sky darkens fully, the mesas align with the first bright stars. The kind of alignment you build when you want memory to outlast your language, your name. At camp, the thesis no one will touch barehanded sits between the coffee and the course samples. That ancient hands once shaped part of this land. That a violence beyond weather altered it forever. That pieces of both stories still speak if we listen without shouting. The counter-thesis sits beside it with equal weight. That erosion and impact and light are tricksters. That our pattern-hungry brains recruit coincidence into meaning. We hold both like two ends of a rope and pull for balance. Dawn again. A drone maps a field of dunes. The overlay draws lines that meet in angles we know from architecture, not from wind. The pilot shrugs, but his eyes are loud. I don't like it when sand keeps a secret, he says. Back among the mounds, the idol returns to the light. Its carvings show a sequence, stars, then flame, then something like rain falling upward. Sky, fire, escape, the linguist says. If this is myth, it is myth arranged like a checklist. If it is history told by those with very little time left to write. Before we leave, we climb one last ridge. The horizon swells with monuments too eroded to claim, too stubborn to dismiss. The wind combs the plain, and the plain answers with a hush that feels like a held breath. On a visor a question appears, typed for the record, but meant for the future. If Mars remembers, what does it want us to know? The final scene in Cydonia is mercilessly simple. A crater, a tablet, a sky of iron and glass. Something happened. Something more than wind and time. Perhaps that is the last dignity of a ruined world. It tells you everything except who to blame. We break camp with pockets full of numbers and a head full of arguments. Behind us, the face dissolves into a hill, the pyramids into weather. Ahead, the belt circles like a rumor you can measure. Between them lies a story we are still not brave enough to finish. As the engines rise and the dust lifts, Mars shrinks to a coin in the window, small, wounded, unafraid. And somewhere inside that wound, a voice we can almost understand keeps repeating, not believe, not deny, but look again. What if Mars was not the end of the story, but only the middle chapter of a cycle that keeps repeating? The camera lifts from the ruins of Cydonia into the stars. There, the solar system itself becomes the stage. We trace the scars across its worlds. Venus rotating backward like a broken clock. Uranus rolling on its side as though toppled. Neptune tugged into orbit by forces no textbook can fully explain. These are not random quirks. They are the fingerprints of catastrophe written across the sky. Inside a modern observatory, scientists huddle before holographic orbits glowing blue against the dark. Their faces are tense, shoulders heavy. One astrophysicist whispers numbers under her breath, diagrams of anomalies spilling across her wrist console. The implication is unbearable. What shattered Maldek, what scarred Mars, could reach Earth too. A desert ridge under starlight. Lasers pierce the heavens as researchers overlay planetary alignments. The Milky Way stretches vast, reminding us that every line in the sky is also a wound. Coincidence, one voice mutters. Or design? The question echoes like thunder. In the archives of a museum, a cracked tablet glows beneath golden light. Its fiery engravings resemble not myth, but memory. A translation scrolls faintly across a scientist's wristband. Destruction, fire, rebirth. Myths of planetary death, carried for millennia, now feel less like allegory than testimony. At the rim of a massive crater on Earth, dawn reveals scars older than civilization. Drones sweep faint green grids across stone walls that plunge into shadow. The scientists stand solemn, realizing this planet too bears wounds from cosmic weapons, whether asteroids or something worse. In a planetary defense room far away, red alerts blink across consoles. A young researcher stares at impact simulations, sweat cutting paths down his face. He doesn't say if. He says, when. The narrative deepens. In labs and lecture halls, heated debates swirl. Holograms of asteroid belts spin above tables, their gaps haunting reminders of worlds that no longer exist. Some insist the instability is random. Others whisper that it is cyclical, a clock that strikes every few 100 million years. Archaeologists dig into Earth's soil and find relics carved with spirals and colliding spheres. Idols show Earth caught between two burning worlds. To believers, they are warnings preserved across ages. Humanity's ancestors tried to tell us the sky could betray us. To skeptics, they are coincidence. But coincidences pile up until they look like patterns, and patterns begin to feel like truth. High in the Andes, a ruined temple faces the stars. Carvings on its walls mirror warnings we have seen on Mars. Fire, flood, escape. Villagers chant by firelight, their oral traditions carrying words that sound eerily like prophecy. In icy tundra, explorers uncover meteorite fields, frozen witnesses to impacts that reshaped climates, toppled kingdoms, and rewrote history. Every landscape becomes a library, every ruin a message. Meanwhile, Earth is watched from orbit. Astronauts gaze at our fragile blue sphere, their helmet visors reflecting probability charts of incoming objects. One whispers, "We are just another Maldek waiting to happen." His words fog the glass, chilling in their simplicity. Back on the ground, global summits convene. Delegates stand beneath holographic asteroid models projected across vast assembly halls. Some argue for planetary defense grids. Others dismiss the threat, fearing panic. Outside those walls, historians open ancient codices filled with star maps. Their pages whisper the same refrain. This has happened before, and it will happen again. Stonehenge, Easter Island, the ziggurats of the Andes. Megalithic alignments all pointing skyward. Were they calendars of stars, or warnings carved in stone? Standing among them, drones trace invisible lines across the horizon, and suddenly the stones feel less like monuments, more like survival manuals written in architecture. In Arizona, Meteor Crater yawns wide, a scar from a visitor only 50 meters wide. The lesson is brutal. Small stones can change worlds. At Tunguska, frozen forests still carry the memory of an object that exploded before touching ground. The Earth does not forget, even when we choose to. As the voiceover continues, the imagery rises to climax. Earth, suspended between Venus, once called the twin of our planet, but now a suffocating furnace, and Mars, frozen, desolate, scarred. Our home is not immune. It is simply lucky, for now. And then, the closing question. If it has happened twice before, why not again? The final montage, scientists and archaeologists, villagers and astronauts, all gazing upward. A holographic Earth rotates in a narrator's palm, glowing blue and fragile. His words carry the last note of warning and hope. Perhaps we are not searching for aliens at all. Perhaps we are staring into the mirror of the universe, seeing our own face, reflected back through the ruins of worlds that came before us.